Even though deep in my heart I knew that this was idolatry and they were false gods and they were demonic, I couldn't help but ignore all of that because I was blinded by my need for money. So I remember the cards telling me that the grandmother would pass away in the span of this month. And I debated whether or not to tell. But I decided that, since I'm reading at the point of time and I was really believing into it, it was during the era where I was doing my business, there was candles, I was selling crystals online. I was like, okay, I'll just tell them straight. So I told them to the mom and my friend, and I told them, take it with a pinch of salt. Fast forward about 2 weeks later, she texted me. She called me in the middle of the night because her grandmother fell down the flight of stairs in their home and she fractured her spine. Unfortunately, that accident actually led to the grandmother passing away. And I think I carried that guilt with me for quite a long time, and I was so ashamed I couldn't tell anybody around me. I've always known that there was a God. I just didn't know who he is or how this God is like. Growing up, I was in a Buddhist family with my mother's side of the family participating in some like I would say it would lean more towards Taoism. So we did a lot of they have like a lot of ritualistic asking. So they call it Tao Tang, right? Where people would be possessed by um the hell gods or like the different gods, and then they would ask questions and get replies or get solutions to their problems. So for the entirety of my childhood, I remember my family being in a serving capacity in such a place. The meetings always take place from around like 10 p.m. all the way until 3 a.m. I would just remember like it was my entire childhood growing up, especially after my parents divorced, because my mom actually seek the help of the hell god in order to find solutions to her marriage problems at that point. And of course, it was because like her family members wanted the best for her or what they thought was the best for her, so they pushed her to come and get solutions here. I have always been very spiritually sensitive since I was a kid. And it started with little things like wishing for a circle of mushrooms to appear and holding a stick and trusting that the stick would instinctively lead me to the circle of mushrooms. And I remember when I was young, I would constantly be talking like in my head to like the devil. Because from a very young age, right, I think it was like books that I've read or shows that I've watched, like all the American movies and stuff. And so I was really curious about the occult. I think it started when I was really young. And then I found do you know what a wishbone is? It's like a Y shaped stick. So you hold both ends of the stick and it's supposed to lead you to what you're looking for. So I remember reading about it and I wanted to try it out. And so when I held on to the stick, I would ask like questions about it. Like I would ask questions and then I would feel the stick being pulled in a direction and I would just follow. And I remember that time I was like primary school, 8, 9, and I was just asking at the playground, like, oh my god, lead me to answers. And the thing led me to like this tree in the park. And it was on the further end of the park. So my park is pretty long and there are 3 playgrounds. It was the furthest playground where not a lot of people go to. And it was under a tree. And then there was a huge like raven in front of me. It's not a crow, it's the other one with the black beak. I just remember thinking I could hear this bird talk to me in my head. Of course, now I know that all of these do have power. It's very demonic. But back then, when I was a child, everything just felt very magical. So when I was 7, that was when the encounter with the bird happened. And then when I started to turn, like when I was 8 or 9, I started to grow a lot, like very interested in witchcraft. Also because I think I was very influenced by shows that I watched, Wings Club, Ben 10, Harry Potter. And then I would make like my own spells or I would wish really hard and manifest things to happen in life. Growing up, it was very turbulent because I came from a family that is split. So I had to juggle between my mom and my dad and the drifting relationships I found within my family, which was very fractured. And I started to seek answers and comfort in things that were immediate. When I was 14, 15, that was when I was introduced to tarot cards for the first time. And following that, I fell down into a rabbit hole of all the witchcraft things where you do like candles and spells and you buy into the whole crystal thing and the energies. My first introduction to tarot cards was from a friend who brought me to a place in Chinatown where this lady was giving tarot card readings for about like $10 for 3 questions. She asked about past, present, future. And I got hooked immediately on the idea of tarot cards. I was very amazed at the fact that I could immediately get the answer that I seek. And they were really accurate, which, I couldn't help but believe in it because I was like, oh my gosh, this is really what I wanted to hear. So I started going back again and again, asking about school grades, about love life, about fortune, anything that I really wanted to hear. I would go and seek the answers from the tarot cards. And then it was at this point where I decided that I wanted to buy a pack of tarot cards. So I scoured the internet for a pack that seemed to suit who I was as a person and who I felt comfortable with. And I came across a deck called Prisma Vision. It is a very, very dark deck. I think it was one of the darkest deck that exists because of the way it's illustrated. And so when I bought the deck and I first opened it, I remember distinctively hearing a voice, and I knew it was a tarot deck talking to me. The tarot deck said, "Hello." And I remember feeling an instant connection to the tarot deck. And that was when I started to practice reading. First I started reading for my friends, and it moved on to like family members who had like curious questions, my cousins, or like anybody in school, my classmates, my schoolmates, my colleagues at my part-time job. So this happened in 2015. I was on a family trip to Taiwan where I met this fortune teller, and she told me that I have a knack and a talent for fortune telling. Back then, as a young child, hearing that makes you feel really special. Like, oh, I got special power, and I believed in it. And she taught me, because I was on a family vacation, she taught me over the course of 3 days about divination, about reading palms, reading past lives, and also about like fortune telling in general. So unbeknownst to my mom, I actually exchanged Facebook with this fortune teller, and my mentorship continued while I was back in Singapore. And the entire mentorship process was about her teaching me how do you read palms, right? And from palms, which line is which. But the lessons the lessons didn't really translate for me in a very straightforward way. It wasn't like, oh, follow step A, follow step B. When I sat down with somebody and I read their palms, I immediately know what to say. And I think it was so accurate to a point where like a couple of people were genuinely really scared. Because they were like, how do you know these things? It's impossible that you would know because I've never said it to anyone. I remember reading for a friend of mine, and I looked at her palm and I was like, it shows that you have a son. And she was like, what? I've never told anybody, but I got an abortion when I was like really young. And you know what? When you're doing all of this, you yourself get hypnotized in this lie. Because you're like, oh my gosh, everything I'm saying is so true and it's like so accurate. There must be power behind this, right? Another thing that my mentor taught me was reading what is so-called like divination. So it's very simple. She put it that there are two different, like, she taught me that there were two different doors. Divination is when you show an outcome to a situation, but this outcome can be changed through methods, right? Such as acquiring certain crystals, or changing your feng shui, or wearing certain things, that kind of beliefs. And when she taught me divination, I was really young, and I remember thinking to myself, this is so magical. Because it would just be like either a bowl of water, and then so it's a bowl of water, and then you like throw some rice and flip a few coins, and then the person I'm reading for is in front of me. But in the water, I could see the situation and the scenario playing out. That should have been the first inkling that this was definitely demonic, or that there's a spirit behind it. But it didn't register in my brain. I was just like, wow, magic, you know? And other than the water divination, she also taught me how to divine using a mirror. So I actually did a lot of divination readings as well for friends. And then I realized that my answers were very accurate according to their feedback. So I started to charge money for it. Like I was like, oh yes, side hustle. So I started a carousel page where I advertise my tarot reading services. And as the people that wanted my services increased, so did my prices. And I believe at that point in time, I think it was around 2015, 2016, I was one of the only people who were in the tarot cards business who was using the Prisma Vision deck. So I will have to preempt and say that all of these is very demonic. So every single deck do have a spirit attached to it, which is how you can hear feedback, how you get those spiritual downloads, how you get information. My deck was very mean, very ruthless, and very straightforward, which a lot of people seem to gravitate towards because they're like, oh, I want to hear the truth straight up. And so they start to sort me out. As my prices start to increase and I start to gain traction within people, like recommending their friends and everything, I start to land corporate job offers where I'll be invited to sit and draw and read for corporate events, annual galas, D&Ds, or just like a road show. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, this is paying my bills. I was making a lot of money from it because I was charging really exorbitant prices because I was very confident that my answers were very accurate. I remember I had a lot of returning customers, and I was able to, like, the deck itself was able to predict when they were getting pregnant, when I was able to see, like, oh, this person had an abortion in the past, or this person is going to have an accident at this time at this date, and everything came true. And it started to feed into my ego and pride. And it made me a very selfish person and greedy person who wanted more and more. And it was never satisfying. The more I leaned in and the more I started to seek for answers, the more confused I got and the more questions I had. And I was at a very low stage in my life. And during the entire time when I was tarot reading, I was actually very depressed because these things, really drain your energy. After every reading, I felt just very drained and very tired, and I see no hope in life. I kept thinking to myself, I'm here reading cards and drawing answers for other people, and yet I don't have answers of my own for my own life. Because somehow, the more you draw and the more you hear from the deck, the more unsatisfactory the answers get. I felt myself yearning for a deeper connection and for more realistic answers than what the deck was giving me, which was pacifying at its best. So it was then I decided that I didn't want to live my life this way. I had a pretty good amount of returning customers. I had the income. I wasn't suffering by any means, but I was depressed and I wanted to die. And so I set a date. And I was like, I'm just going to choose this date. And once I jump off a building or get hit by a car, I was still figuring out the logistics of it, But I was like, once I'm dead, there will be no more questions. There will be no more pain, no more suffering, no more depression. But I couldn't go through with it because I had promised a friend that I would show up for one of her Christmas productions at her church. And I was like, okay, fine. Since I already made a promise, I would show up. And it was at this production where I heard God for the first time. I remember the pastor telling everybody in the house to lift up their arms if they were tired or burdened, because our God is a God who yearns to take care of us, and He yearns to take care of our burdens and carry our problems and listen to us, and He loves us. Seeing the people around me raising their hands, as a newcomer and as a guest, I raised my hands too, because I was like, oh, everybody is doing it, so I'll do it too. And when the pastor said that God yearns to lift our burdens up for us, I really, really believed it, because I felt Him say to me, I heard Him say, you know, I know how tired you are. I've always been here and you can come home. It was the first time I've ever heard of God. And honestly, that experience saved my life. I dedicated myself to Jesus there and then. And I renounced my ways of sinful living. I renounced my tarot cards. I renounced everything. But one encounter wasn't enough to change my whole life. And I soon fell back into my old ways, because I did not have a deep, intimate relationship with Jesus. I only knew God on the surface, but I didn't know who or what He is. And as I fell back into my old ways, into my old company, the lure of the tarot cards started to call out to me again. I was at a point in time where I needed money, and I was thinking to myself, oh, it's gonna be just a quick transaction. I'm gonna be answering a few questions for some people. They believe in it. I don't have to believe in it. There's no harm in that. And so I picked right back up where I started, and my old customers just come flooding back in. And I'm telling you, the enemy works really hard. The enemy knows when we're struggling, and he would try everything in its power to distract us from the Word of God, to distract us from God, to pull us away from the presence of God and the people of God. And that was what happened. Long before I made the choice to go back into tarot reading, I've always gotten messages from my old customers being like, hey, when are you going to do a reading again? Is it possible to do a reading for me? And then some of them were from my close friends, and I felt obligated, in a sense, to do a reading for them. Even though deep in my heart I knew that this was idolatry, and they were false gods, and they were demonic. I couldn't help but ignore all of that, because I was blinded by my need for money. I'll remember this really clearly in my mind. It's in August 2022, towards the end of August. I was reading for a friend of mine and her mom. And it was just the usual question, past, present, future, questions about work and family. And when it started to go into family, the mom asked me about her grandmother, which is the mom's mom, my friend's grandmother. And I was like, sure, I have extra time. And as I pull out the cards, the spiritual download that I got was that the grandmother was set to pass away at a month from the reading, within a month. And that's the thing with tarot also, is that there is never a general set date. It's always a time frame, because they don't know your future. So I remember the cards telling me that the grandmother would pass away in the span of this month. And I debated whether or not to tell, because I was struggling. I was like, ooh, what if it's not true? There will be doubts like that as well. But I decided that, since I'm reading at the point of time and I was really believing into it, it was during the era where I was doing my business, there was candles, I was selling crystals online. I was like, okay, I'll just tell them straight. So I told them to the mom and my friend, and I told them, take it with a pinch of salt. And my friend laughed it off, saying that, oh, my grandmother very healthy. There's nothing wrong with my grandma. Fast forward about 2 weeks later, and she texted me. So I remember it was 15 September 2022, where she texted me very urgently asking for a tarot reading in the middle of the night. She called me in the middle of the night and then she followed up with a message. And then basically she was asking me for a tarot reading because her grandmother fell down the flight of stairs in their home and she fractured her spine. Unfortunately, that accident actually led to the grandmother passing away. It was the first time in my entire life doing this tarot reading that I had prophesied or predicted a death. Predicting things like marriage or abortions or giving birth, getting pregnant, adultery, things like this always come up. But death was something that had never came up until this point. And I think it weighed very heavily on my heart for the longest time because afterwards, when I went back to church and I've renounced all of this, I keep thinking to myself, if I had not given the news, if I had not said the news of like, hey, within this time frame, your grandmother is like, gonna pass away, would she not have passed away? Because it's all about believing and falling under the umbrella of the demon. And I think I carried that guilt with me for quite a long time. And I was so ashamed I couldn't tell anybody around me. And it was at this time, it was during one of our radical conferences actually. And I didn't tell anyone about this because I just really felt so much anxiety and guilt. I felt like I somehow led to the grandmother's death, which is not true, but it was a way for the demons to really mess with my head and use fear to keep me trapped. It was during this period of time where God finally showed me and taught me about the actual spiritual warfare that is existing right now. I have never put much thought into it. When people talk about spiritual warfare, I always thought, yes, you're going through a breakthrough, that's great. But it never registered in my mind that it was an ongoing, consistent, everyday thing. And it was at this point when everything started. The sleep paralysis, having to really just reevaluate my life because every single day I kept seeing this demon standing at the edge of my bed and I'm calling out for Jesus and I'm trying to speak in tongues and the demon just keeps laughing at me, saying that, you really think that he has the power to save you? The answer is yes, but back then I didn't believe it myself because I didn't have a deep, intimate relationship with Jesus. And so I was struggling all the way. But then God sent a friend to help me out. So the friend was from my previous church, and she invited me to sit in with one of our mentors. And when we reconnected, I told her about this tarot card problem. She told me to renounce the tarot cards and put it away. And I did. And for a while, everything seemed better. And he was taunting me and saying that I have given you so much power and wealth over the years. You owe me. You owe it to me to serve me. And I remember being so afraid. I remember someone like breathing in my ear and all I could smell was like the smell of rotten eggs. And I remember like someone scratching my back, like a claw just digging into my skin. And in that one moment when I called out Jesus, I felt a warm breeze rush into the living room where the deliverance was being held. And in that moment, I felt so enveloped and so safe that I knew there was a Holy Spirit in the room with us, and I knew that that was Jesus. That He has come. He has paid the price for me on the cross. I did not deserve that, but He had, because He loves me so much. I realized in that moment, all of that fear and that lie, it was just building this prison and cage for me, so I couldn't escape. But freedom was always there, and freedom is in Him. Freedom is in Jesus. And when I declare that out loud, that has power over me. When I say that, I'm renouncing this, and I renounce it from the bottom of my heart, and I repented, and I'm begging for forgiveness on the floor of the living room. That was when I realized how close my soul was to eternal damnation just because I wanted a quick answer. Just because I wanted to hear an answer to a problem, just because I thought something was harmless, but it's not. And that's how they get to you. They package it as it's just harmless, it's just a fun question, it's just a party trick. But the truth is that it's way deeper than all of that. There is true demonic spirit at play. Everything is a spiritual warfare. And the deeper you thread, the harder it would be to get out. But you need to have faith in Him and only Him. Because there is no trenches that Jesus cannot pull you out from. And no matter where you are and no matter which dark alleyway you're in, on top of the hills, down the mountains, He is there with us. And I know that now, and I hold on to that. I promise you that there is real answers and joy when you follow Jesus and when you get to know Him. Joy unlike anything you have ever experienced in this world. Peace that no man can give you. And answers with clarity and certainty that no card deck can ever provide. And it comes from the hands of our Maker, who knows about our past, our present, our future, and still loves us so dearly. And it's never too late. There's no prerequisite. There's no price to pay. You don't need to pay $15 to talk to Jesus. It's free. And you can do so today. I can just say, "Dear Jesus, I have a question." And you don't need any cuts or any reading for Him to reply you. There is no need for a conduit for you to get the answers you so desperately seek. And I assure you that He hears you. And I just want to end it off by saying that God is good, all glory to Him, and He loves you very, very, very much.